excited because today I want to speak about the New Jerusalem. Home is where the heart is. That's the title of my sermon today. Home is where the heart is. And we are in a series right now here at Emmanuel, Westminster. And we are looking at the Psalms of Ascent. The Psalms of Ascent, the great pilgrimage psalms. These are Psalms 120 right through to 134. 14 Psalms, 130 to 134. And these are the Psalms that the Israelites would sing. And they would sing these songs 3 times a year when they went up to Jerusalem for the great festivals, Passover, Pentecost, and the autumn feasts. And as they all traveled from all parts of Israel, they would be traveling on the road on this long journey, depending where they lived, to Jerusalem, the city of David, and they would sing these songs. And we find that in these Psalms of Ascent, that out of these 120 to 134, these Psalms, they are in groups of 3. Groups of 3. So when you read through the Psalms of Ascent in order, you're going to read them in 3s. They're like mini pilgrimages of 3. And there's an order in each 3 of these Psalms. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the first Psalm of every group of 3, and we started with 120 a few weeks ago. The first psalm in these groups of 3 is always talking about the difficulties, stresses, and obstacles of life, or difficulties, stresses, and obstacles that they would face on their pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So the first one in each one of these groups of 3s talks about the difficulty of life. The second one in each group of 3 focuses on the Lord's power to save, to deliver, to build, to strengthen, to keep hope alive as you're dealing with these difficult situations. So the first is the difficulties. The second is the Lord's help during these difficulties. And then the third in these mini pilgrimages is always about coming home, where you're at last in the city of Jerusalem, where you have at last finished your journey's end. First one, the difficulties of life. Second one, God's help in life. Third, when you've reached your destination. And in these Psalms, the destination was always the city of David, Jerusalem. Now, these Psalms speak to us today as Christians because we too are on a pilgrimage to a destination. Not to the Jerusalem on Mount Zion on the earth, but to that city of Jerusalem that is in heaven, that shall one day come down. Have you ever finally reached a destination that you always wanted to travel to? For many, many years, there's a place you wanted to go. You would look at the photos. Perhaps you would watch some videos on the place. Perhaps you would hear from other people that had gone to that place, their experience of it. And in your heart, you had this longing that one day you would journey to this place. Perhaps some of you have felt like that about Israel, about Jerusalem. I know many of you have visited Jerusalem and the Holy Land at least once, and perhaps you had a desire to physically go to the physical Holy Land. What was it like when you finally got there? I haven't been there yet, but I remember, for me, it was a mountain in the Bavarian mountains, a mountain, a village in a lake, and I wanted to go there for years, and I would read about it, and I would look at the photos about this and read, online about people who had gone to this mountain in Bavaria and the lakes. And then one day my wife surprised me. She had booked a holiday for her, myself, and my son to go to this place that I'd always wanted to go to. And I remember the journey, the flight into Munich, then the 3-hour journey to these things, and finally I got to see this place that had been in my heart for so long. And it was so nice to have finally arrived at a place I'd always wanted to be. Well, this is what we hear in these Psalms of Ascent. People's eyes are on the destination. It's Jerusalem, the city of David. They're going to celebrate at the great feasts, and their journey, wherever it's taken them from, they're singing together in their village groups, their town groups, their family groups. Even Jesus did this pilgrimage. Do you remember? There's not very many records about when he was a youngster, but do you remember when he went up to Jerusalem with his family and his village, and then they all left together, and he remained talking to the Pharisees and the teachers, and they came back and they said, "Where have you been, Jesus?" They thought they were with the village group. And he said, "I've been in my Father's house. What's the problem?" You remember that? That was Jesus and his family who had done the pilgrimage with their village and were now returning, but Jesus had decided to stay for a bit in his Father's house. And so this is about their journey and what they're going through in their journey to Jerusalem to celebrate the Lord. And that to them was their home. And so when we come to Psalm 22, that I want to read to you now, this is the third in the mini pilgrimage that began in 120, the Psalm 120. And in Psalm 123, next week, well, not next week because we have the Apostle Dowdy with us, but the week after, we'll begin a new cycle of three. So here's Psalm 122. They've had difficulties and problems, and they've sung their way through it. They've had God being with them in their difficulties and problems, and they've sung their way through it. And their journey has now ended. They're at their destination. They've reached Jerusalem. And this is one of the psalms that they would sing. Psalm 122. I rejoiced with those who said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord, according to the statutes given to Israel. There stands the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. You can see that psalmist is happy to be there. Excuse me, it's a bit high. He has reached his destination. They've been on that journey all the way up to Jerusalem. It's been hot, it's been difficult, it's been troubled. They'd have to sacrifice a lot to come. But now at last their feet are in the gates of Jerusalem. Imagine that. It's like, I'm here. Oh, look, here are the gates, and I'm going through them right now. And it's a celebration of coming home, where every true Israelite's heart was always focused on Jerusalem, where the temple was, where the Holy of Holies was, the Ark of the Covenant, and the great feasts. That was their home, wherever they were in Israel. And what a contrast. In the first psalm of these mini pilgrimage, there was a hostile world, a difficult world. But here now, they are in Zion where there's peace. In the other two psalms, there was unsettlement, a feeling of not belonging. But now they were in their home, their joy, their delight, Zion, Jerusalem. In the world, they felt excluded and isolated in the first two Psalms, but now they were at home with the rest of the tribes, their friends and their families, and the people of God. On the road, there were dangers and difficulties in their journey, but here in Zion, Jerusalem, they were secure. They'd completed their journey, and their former difficulties and sadness and dangers had been swallowed up in the reality that they were in God's holy city. They began in prayer, Lord, help me, and now they're ending in this group of three prayer saying, Lord, I'm here and I am rejoicing. But notice, not everything in this psalm is perfect. This isn't a perfect Jerusalem where nothing ever goes wrong. This isn't a perfect city where there's no threats of instability or difficulty. It's not perfect. They still have to pray for Jerusalem. And so there we see in verse 6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It's not given that Jerusalem will always have peace. And isn't it true, even earlier, when we had public prayer, we prayed for the peace of Jerusalem. Why? Because it's far from peaceful. In fact, isn't it true to say that throughout history, Jerusalem has been one of the most war-torn and conflict-ridden cities in the world. And so there's this sort of now but not yet, this sort of, we're in the city of David and we're so happy here, but we don't have the fullness of what this city should be. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Why? Because there's conflict. We need to pray for security within their towers. Why? Because outside Jerusalem there are threats that aliens and foreigners could come and take over, as indeed they did many times in the history of Jerusalem. So for the sake of my family and friends, peace to you, Jerusalem. For the sake of the house of the Lord, I will seek your prosperity. So do you notice they're at the place on earth where they longed to be, the destination of the Jewish pilgrimage. And they're so happy. You can see they're so happy to be there. It's so wonderful, but it's tinged with sadness and conflict. Intercession is still needed because not all is perfect and well in this Jerusalem. Now, all of this was written for us today. The Old Testament speaks in natural terms very often about spiritual things in the New Testament. So Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 can talk about the children of Israel being delivered from Egypt and going through baptism in the water and in the sky and then rebelling against the Lord. He can say all those things are examples for us today that we learn from them their mistakes. Abraham, those that are of faith, those that are Christians and believe in Jesus, that he died and rose again, we walk in the footsteps of Abraham. So we can look at the life of Abraham in the Old Testament and we can learn how to live as a Christian through his successes and his mistakes. And we've already mentioned in this series that we as Christians are on a pilgrimage. And this pilgrimage is spiritual. But this pilgrimage is very similar to the pilgrimages that we're reading in these Psalms of Ascent. Theirs was a physical pilgrimage, a physical journey to a physical place, physical Jerusalem. That was their pilgrimage. But our pilgrimage as believers is a spiritual pilgrimage. We are on a journey, my friends. Just as they were on a journey, we too are on a journey. The problems that they faced in these songs of ascent in each of the first psalms of the cycle of three, or the problems that we face in life today. They help help that they have from the Lord in each of the second psalms in the cycle of 3 psalms is the help that is available to us today as Christians in this world. And their destination, the joys of being in a Jerusalem that wasn't perfect, but the best that they had, is a picture of the Jerusalem that every Christian is journeying towards. Not the Jerusalem in Israel today, although many of you have been there and got a lot from it, but the Jerusalem that comes from above. Let me show you this even more clearly. Next slide, please. In Galatians chapter 4, we have Paul speaking in analogy form to the Galatians. Now, the problem with the Galatians was this: they got radically saved. They weren't Jewish. They got radically saved, and they began in the Holy Spirit and by hearing with faith. But some other Jewish people got into these radically born-again Gentiles and told them, what are you doing? You can't be living like this. You need to get circumcised. You need to follow the dietary laws. You really need to become under the law and as Jewish as other Jews. And we're interfering with their freedom in the gospel. And Paul addresses that. But here, in this passage, he tells them a story and he challenges them. Are they going to be followers of Moses and under the law? Or are they going to be followers of Jesus and sons of Abraham by faith? And they have a choice. If they're Jewish, if they want to go the Jewish route without Jesus and be sons of Moses, their choice is they can go up on a pilgrimage 3 times a year, physically, from Galatia in Turkey over to Jerusalem. That's their choice. Or there is another choice, another journey, and another Jerusalem. Which Jerusalem were they to choose? Here we go. Tell me, you who want to be under the law, are you not aware of what the law says? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by the slave woman and the other by the free woman. His son by the slave woman was born according to the flesh, but his son by the free woman was born as a result of the divine promise. These things are being taken figuratively. The women, Sarah and Hagar, represent 2 covenants. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. Now, Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia, where the law came, and corresponds to the present city of Jerusalem, because she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother. Can you see how these Psalms of Ascent make so much sense? There is a parallel that Paul is saying. You want to be under the law? Then 3 times down to Jerusalem. And if you want to be on the law, you're slave to the law. You're of the flesh, not of the spirit. This is human effort. This is natural effort. You're like Hagar and you're like Ishmael, that were born without any promises of God and without any supernatural work of the Spirit. That's all you can have under the law. If you want it, get down to Jerusalem. But then he says, wait a second, you can be children of Abraham, Sarah, the miraculous child. And you have a home that's not the physical Jerusalem, but it's a real Jerusalem. It's a Jerusalem that is above, in heaven, the heavenly Jerusalem. It's free. It's free from all these laws. And she is our mother, our mother. Isn't it interesting how sometimes when people talk about their nation, they speak to it in terms of being a mother, Mother Russia, you know what I mean? Or you speak about your country in these sort of family terms. Well, our mother is not London or Britain or Malaysia or Nigeria, wherever you may be from. our mother, our capital city, is the Jerusalem from above. And let me tell you something, it's not figurative or illustrative. The Jerusalem from above is even more real than Jerusalem in the Holy Land, because the Jerusalem from above will last forever and ever and ever, and will one day descend, and heaven will come to earth. Let me continue on this. The next slide. You are on a journey or a pilgrimage, and your pilgrimage, your life, the decisions you make, the choices that you make, the priorities in your life that you have, priorities for the Lord, priorities for this, priorities for that, all of these things are part of the quality of your journey. How's your journey doing? How's your pilgrimage doing? Are you getting closer to the New Jerusalem? Are you becoming more like a member of the New Jerusalem, a citizen of the New Jerusalem? Or are you stuck somewhere on the pathway, immovable? All right? Next passage, we see this journey. Whatever Abraham did, we walk in his footsteps. He's an example for us. Here we are, Hebrews 11, 8-10. By faith, not law, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So, although we know, naturally speaking, Abraham and his sons had a physical journey that God gave to them, a pilgrimage in a way, because on that way to the promised land, they learned how to mature in faith. And on that journey to the promised land, physical promised land of Canaan, there was another more important journey going on. And Abraham knew it. He wasn't longing for an earthly city, but he was longing and hungry for the city that dwelt in heaven, whose maker was God. Then in the same chapter, verse 13, speaking about all those so far that are heroes of faith, that are our examples in Hebrews 11. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them from afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed them, that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out of, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he's prepared a city for them. Can you see this theme here? You are on a pilgrimage. That's the definition of a Christian life. You're on a pilgrimage up to the heavenly Jerusalem. And you're going to face, as in the first psalm of the cycle of threes, difficulties in that journey. But just as in the second psalm in the cycle of threes, God is going to show you that he's with you and that he's for you and he's answering your prayers. And then finally, you're going to reach your destination that these people have reached. But on the way, while you haven't yet reached it, it's going to be in your heart. Home is where the heart is. You're not in the heavenly Jerusalem yet. You're here on earth. But where is your home? Where is your heart? These Jewish pilgrims, they had Jerusalem on their mind. Jerusalem on their mind. It wasn't just they were aimlessly walking through life saying, God is with me, help me Lord, and there's another difficulty. Here's, oh God, help me in this, aimlessly wandering like they did in the desert. No, they were fixed. Their hearts were fixed on the New Jerusalem, the culture of the New Jerusalem, the destination of the New Jerusalem. It's where they were heading every morning when they woke up. They got up back on the pilgrimage way. And you know who leads the pilgrimage of the Christian? Jesus. He's at the front of us all, leading us personally and corporately in our local churches. He is leading us on a journey. And that journey is the heavenly Jerusalem. And the more we focus on it, the more home is where the heart is, the more the heart becomes like the home. It becomes like, it's like my mother, who comes from the Lake District in Cumbria. And I've always noticed with my mother through the years, she came from a farming community, and then she got educated and became a school teacher, all these things. We ended up living very middle-class life in middle-class Harrogate, okay? And I noticed that whenever we go back to my mother's home in Cumbria, her accent would change from being very Harrogate middle-class, which she just picked up, to being quite broad Cumbrian. Even when one of her many sisters or brothers rang her at Harrogate, where I was brought up and schooled, Mum would be speaking to me with a very neutral accent, if you've ever met her. She would pick up the phone, and I'd be in the other room, and I'd go, oh, she's speaking to my Auntie Dot or my Uncle Brian, because her accent would immediately change. Because home was on the phone, and home was where her heart was and had been formed. Let me move on to the next slide, because I really want to punch this through. Because if you understand today that you are on a pilgrimage of the heart to a heavenly Jerusalem, of which you are even now a citizen of the above, then you will understand and have direction in your life that you might not have had previously. Hebrews 12, speaking to the congregation of Hebrews. You have come to Mount Zion. Zion means Jerusalem. You have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. You see? So although we're traveling to our heavenly home, we have already, in one sense, come to our heavenly home. We are the church of the firstborn, the assembly. And so in some sense, and I'll come back to this in a moment, in some sense, the church on earth is an outpost or a colony of the Jerusalem that is above. Now I know that colony isn't a very nice word today and doesn't have nice background connotations for many. I understand that, but the word here makes sense, because what is a colony? It is a place that replicates as much as possible its home. So when the Romans colonized across Europe, what would they do? They would set up little Romes as much as they could. They would have the Roman baths, they would have the Roman laws, they would have the Roman amphitheaters, everything would be little Romans. And you can go in Britain today. I like going up to the north of England in Northumberland, along Hadrian's Wall, and visiting the different camps that used to be Roman. And they say, oh, this is where they'd have the Roman baths, this is where they'd have the Roman, and it was like little Rome placed everywhere. Even today, for good or for bad, you can visit spots of the old British Empire, and you can go to places across the world, and you can see buildings that might just be down the street in Westminster. You can see law courts. You can see, I remember going to Singapore and seeing a beautiful cricket ground in the old quarter. And I felt like I was somewhere in England. Even in Singapore today, I thought, I feel at home, because I live next to a cricket ground in Harrogate, very middle class Harrogate. And so Colonizing is to take home and the culture of home and place it somewhere. And this is what the church is meant to be doing. We are meant to be colonies of the heavenly Jerusalem. Now, just like the natural Jerusalem that natural Jews go to pilgrimage in, and that natural Jerusalem we read still needed prayer, wasn't perfect, was a sort of Old Testament image of the perfect New Testament New Jerusalem. Just like so the church is imperfect in many ways, but we are meant to be ambassadors of Christ. We are meant to be colonists of Christ. Colonists through the gospel and love. Colonists. That's what this is meant to be, a colony. It's not just a church service that you visit once a month. Come on now. Once a week, please, unless you're infirm or elderly and you can't make it. Once a week, the colony comes together in congregational form. Hebrews talks about this, right? This is more than a service. It's meant to be more. It's more than fellowship. It's more than life groups. It's us, the colonists, our home. We're strangers, like Abraham. We are strangers. The first psalm we looked at in this cycle of 3 said we are strangers. We feel alien. We don't feel at home in this world, but we feel at home together. And we are colonists of the New Jerusalem. And people can come and join us and find security and purpose and can come on a journey with us as we become more like the New Jerusalem and its culture. And the New Jerusalem comes in its form of the church, not perfect, not mature, but a taste of heaven here on earth. You should be a taste of heaven on earth to those around you. That's what you should be. And the closer you are to the Lord, then the further on you are in your pilgrimage. And you say, well, I don't want to go on a pilgrimage. I'm going to heaven anyway because I believe Jesus died for me. I just do my own thing. All right. Well, when you get to heaven, you're going to feel very weird. Because you're going to take your carnal self, even though you're saved by grace, into heaven. You're going to feel really weird. Not only that, you're going to have to stand before the judgment seat in heaven. You've got to heaven by grace, and Jesus is going to ask you one question. How did you journey on my pilgrimage? How did you journey? And if you look in Revelation, it speaks about the New Jerusalem. That nothing unclean will be allowed in it. So if you're a backslidden Christian, if you are not journeying to the New Jerusalem, if your pilgrimage is to Sodom and Gomorrah, if you're dwelling in the courts of Babylon, God help you, even though you're saved by grace, you will be chastised severely. You'll be saved by fire, bringing nothing on your journey. Jerusalem will be alien to you. You'll be in it, but you won't be of it. And you'll be weeping in heaven. Oh yes, oh yes. There's a journey. How are you doing on your journey? Are you dwelling in the courts of Sodom and Gomorrah? Are you more like a citizen of Sodom and Gomorrah? Are you more like a citizen of spiritual Babylon? Are you a colonist of this world? There's bishops in the Church of England right now as I speak that are colonists of Babylon, taking in Babylon views of sexuality and gender and trying to colonize Babylon into the Church of England. But there's others that are there that we prayed for who are colonists of heaven, who understand that God's pattern is the best pattern and it's not up for debate, not up to debate. And these things are important. These things are important. And how is your journey? Maybe you're on your way to Jerusalem. Maybe I've been too harsh on some of you, although probably not on some, living in Babylon. God said, don't stay in Babylon. He said, come out of Babylon, right? Come out of Babylon, all right? Out of Babylon. Not half in, half out. Out of Babylon. The only way you can deal with Babylon is to come out. We're not here in London to reform Babylon, and London is Babylon, my friends. London is Babylon. We're not here to reform Babylon. We're not here to reform Babylon. We're here to call London out of Babylon on the way to the New Jerusalem, and that in itself will change London. That's right. It's revolutionary. But maybe you're on your journey to Jerusalem. Maybe I've been too strong for some of you, although some of you need what I've just said. But maybe you're on your journey, but you're wandering around a little bit. You're like, maybe you're camped on your journey, on your pilgrimage. Can you imagine camping on the way to Jerusalem? Can you imagine some from the village, and they've got all their picnics and everything, and they're on their way to pilgrimage in Jerusalem, and they find a nice camping spot by a little oasis, and they camp there. Oh, this is lovely. Oh, this is nice here. Yeah, but Jerusalem's way up that hill, and through that desert area, and through that difficult place where there's thieves and dangers and wild animals. Yeah, well, we'll get there in good time. We'll get there let's not rush things. Got plenty of time. And you're camped, immovable on your pilgrimage, or hardly moving, snail's pace, when you should be saying, this is my journey. I'm going to become more like my King in New Jerusalem. I'm going to grow. I'm going to be a citizen. I'm going to be a colonist. And I'm going to be strong. And my home is in the New Jerusalem. And my home on earth is in the body of Christ. Which I haven't got time to go through. Many of the things that are pictured here, as you'll see in your life groups, in Jerusalem that make up the church are echoed in the church. And so I end today. These things that I've spoken to you today, they're not illustrations. They're not little nice stories about, heaven, and these are real. This is Bible truth and Bible reality. You're either on a pilgrimage to God, or you're on the broad way to destruction. And you've got to come out of Babylon, leave Sodom and Gomorrah behind, and no looking back and turning salt, and get on that pilgrimage and grow in the Lord. Become part of God's people. Grow. Help others on the pilgrimage. You may be on the pilgrimage, but what about those that are broken? Their legs are hurting, their feet are sore, they don't know the way to Jerusalem. You know it, you're a mature Christian, you've grown, you've had the milk of Christ, you've had the meat of Christ, you know your scriptures. Well, what about the others that don't know, that are stumbling along, don't really know what's going on, don't know what a pilgrim's like, don't know the direction? Isn't it time that you help the weaker pilgrims on your way so that we can go, the strong and the mature and the old, the young and the weak and the infirm? They didn't travel as individuals, one person going ahead like a strong athlete on a marathon, and one left behind, hobbling, wounded in life, wounded in emotions. No, they went together, they battled together, they sang together, and they arrived together. If you believe it, say amen. Father, as we receive your word today, we know that a response is required. Hearing the word without doing the word is as useless as never hearing in the first place. So bless us, Lord. Guide us, Lord. Help us to be a beautiful colony of Jerusalem on earth. Help us grow in the colony of love, in the colony of service and truth, and helping one another on the journey. In Jesus' name we pray.